Welcome to another episode of HR Gamechangers. I'm Dave.
And I'm Louisa. It's great to be here.
And I'm here today with the brilliant organizational strategist Louisa to unpack a really pivotal shift happening across the corporate landscape.
It is. It's a shift that really challenges decades of conventional wisdom about how we hire people.
Absolutely. It's not just about a new process in HR, is it? It feels more like a fundamental reassessment of what we even consider value in an employee.
That's the perfect way to put it. We're reevaluating the very signals of value.
Today, we're going to be looking at why so many companies are, rapidly moving away from relying only on traditional academic credentials.
And moving toward demonstrated capability. What can you actually do?
Exactly. We're discussing key concepts around skills-based hiring. And a lot of this thinking was initially crystallized by the author Brett Beauchamp-Russell, who did a great job analyzing the failings of that old model. So our mission today is to unpack why the traditional resume so often fails to capture the best talent, and then detail the strategic, practical path forward for organizations that are looking for adaptability, for high performance, and just a better talent fit.
And hopefully this conversation will give you the framework to start moving your own organization in that direction.
Okay, let's just jump right in.
Let's do it.
Let's unpack a scenario that, we see this play out every single day.
All the time.
Picture two candidates. They're both applying for a mid-level analyst job. Candidate A walks in with a polished degree from a very prestigious, very selective university.
The right school.
The right school. Candidate B, on the other hand, built their expertise through a mix of things, maybe some intensive online courses, a top-tier boot camp in data visualization, maybe a few freelance projects that made real money for clients.
And they've got volunteer leadership roles where they managed complex tasks. They have, real provable skills.
But the traditional hiring process, that old instinct, it almost always favors candidate A, the graduate. It doesn't even matter what the job description says.
It's a perfect illustration of what some call signaling theory in hiring. For decades, the entire system has relied on what we can call the 3 pillars of tradition.
Okay, what are those?
They're the proxies that offer comfort and predictability to, let's face it, very busy hiring managers.
Right, they need a shortcut.
They do. So pillar 1 is the academic degree, pillar 2, the number of years of experience, and pillar 3, the job titles they've held before.
Those 3 things.
Yes. They served as filters, signaling, a baseline level of competence, or at least compliance. And in an era where information was harder to come by, maybe they were a necessary evil, a way to reduce risk.
I get the appeal. They're clean, they're easy to count, and the manager feels like they've done their due diligence. But that's where the systemic flaws begin to creep in, because this comfortable system actually hurts the business.
Profoundly.
So where is the traditional model really failing us right now?
Well, the failure is structural. The first major flaw is something that's been termed degree inflation.
A degree inflation.
Yeah. It didn't happen overnight. It was the slow creeping process where job requirements just kept rising. Suddenly, you needed a 4-year degree for roles that historically just valued hands-on vocational skill.
We see that in administrative roles, even some sales jobs.
Absolutely. The degree stopped being about specific knowledge for the job and just became a filter, a gatekeeper. The whole hiring process turned into this credential arms race instead of a true search for capability.
And of course, when you create a contest based on credentials, you're immediately excluding huge groups of incredibly talented people.
You've hit on the second systemic flaw, untapped potential. When you make that degree mandatory, the system just mirrors existing socioeconomic barriers.
Right.
It systematically excludes anyone who couldn't afford or access that traditional path, maybe because of cost or geography or family responsibilities.
Or they just preferred a different way of learning.
Exactly. Think of the self-taught coder, the military veteran with incredible specialized training that doesn't fit a neat civilian degree title. You are actively turning away capable people because of a symbol they don't have. The opportunity cost there is it's enormous.
And then there's the speed of change. This brings us to the third flaw, doesn't it? The problem of lagging education.
This point is becoming more and more critical every year because of technology. Higher education, just by its nature, with accreditation and curriculum design, it just cannot keep pace with the market.
Not even close.
Think about a field like AI model deployment, or specialized cybersecurity, or even digital marketing strategies. The skills you learned 4 years ago in a degree program, they might be functionally obsolete today.
Or at the very least, you're significantly behind the curve.
Right. The life cycle for some technical skills is maybe down to 18 to 24 months.
Wow. So if the skill becomes obsolete faster than the time it takes to even get the credential, then relying on that credential is a fundamentally backward-looking strategy.
It is. As Brett Beauchamp Russell's work really highlights, you risk hiring based on a static symbol, a qualification that means less every single year, instead of prioritizing dynamic capability.
Which is the ability to learn and adapt right now.
Exactly. The old system optimizes for history, not for future readiness.
So the takeaway for organizations is pretty stark. If you cling to the old credential model, you are, by default, missing out on the most adaptable, creative problem solvers. You're hiring for a job that doesn't exist anymore.
You're hiring for yesterday's company.
So the answer to this failure is the big shift we're here to discuss, skills-based hiring. But let's be really clear about what this means.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of companies think they're doing it just by, deleting the required degree line from a job post. It's much deeper than that.
Oh, much deeper. That's a critical distinction. Removing the degree requirement is a necessary first step, but it's not sufficient, not by a long shot.
So what is it then?
Skills-based hiring is a fundamental overhaul of the organization's perspective. You're moving your attention away from where someone learns something.
The university name, the old job title.
Right? All of that. And you're focusing intensely on what they can demonstrably do, and crucially, how quickly they can learn new things. We're talking about specific competencies, proficiency levels, and learning agility.
So it forces you to completely re-engineer the job description itself.
It has to. Instead of demanding a BA in communications and 5 years of experience, the description has to shift to focus on measurable outcomes and the skills needed to get there.
Can you give an example? For that marketing role, maybe.
Sure. A skills-based description would say something like advanced proficiency in campaign analysis using Platform X, or demonstrated ability to develop content strategy that drives 10% month-over-month engagement growth.
Very specific.
Very. It's about tying skills to outcomes. You move rigorously from inputs, like their educational history, to the desired outputs, which are the proven skills.
Okay, that clarifies the what. Now let's talk about the why. Why is this an essential strategy for business competitiveness, not just a nice-to-have change?
Well, the first advantage is direct and quantifiable. You get a much wider talent pool, and you speed up your time to hire.
How so?
By taking down those artificial barriers, the degree requirements, you immediately open the gates to huge segments of the talent market you were ignoring before.
The self-taught experts, the veterans we mentioned, people from coding boot camps.
Exactly. And also lateral movers from other industries or parents returning to the workforce who have incredible project management skills but maybe not a traditional degree. You drastically increase the supply side of your talent equation.
And I imagine it makes sourcing more efficient, too.
It does. You reduce all that wasted time chasing the perfect resume, that unicorn candidate who checks every single traditional box but might not actually be the best person for the job.
You fill roles faster.
Much faster, which saves money and reduces the drag on the organization from having critical roles sit empty.
Okay, that makes sense. Advantage 2, then, is about what happens after the hire. Better job fit, higher performance, and better retention.
This is a huge one. When a candidate is hired because an assessment proved they can do the actual work, not just that they studied the theory, their performance ceiling is just higher from day one.
Because they know they belong.
They know they belong. That confidence comes from proven ability, and it translates directly into higher job satisfaction. The data on this is consistent.
And they stay longer.
They stay longer.
Yeah.
When you hire for competencies that are actually aligned with the role, performance goes up and turnover goes down. That's a massive cost saving.
This also has huge implications for diversity and inclusion. Let's talk about that.
That's the third strategic advantage, and it's a powerful one. We can call it the inclusion effect.
Okay.
Skills-based hiring, by its very nature, acts as a leveler. It helps break down those socioeconomic barriers that have historically favored candidates who could afford an elite education.
It widens the lens.
It widens the lens to recognize talent wherever it was grown. Community college, online courses, on-the-job experience. It doesn't matter. You naturally achieve greater representation from different backgrounds and perspectives.
But let me push back on that for a second. If we remove degrees as a filter, are we just shifting the bias? Maybe now it's biased towards people who can afford an expensive boot camp or who have the time for big personal projects. Does it really solve the access problem?
That is a critical point of friction, and it's where execution matters so much. You're right. If a company just replaces a degree requirement with a mandate for a specific high-cost certificate, they've just moved the
They
goalposts.
haven't solved the problem.
No. A true skills-first model has to focus on the output, the demonstrated skill, regardless of the input or the source.
So you have to assess the veteran's operational skills with the same weight as the university grad's theory.
Precisely. And value the self-taught coder's GitHub portfolio as highly as a traditional internship. The true inclusion effect only happens when the assessment itself is fair, accessible, and source agnostic.
So diversity becomes an outcome of a fair process, not a separate initiative.
Exactly. It becomes a natural, powerful output of a genuinely fair, skill-focused process.
Okay, that makes the assessment design absolutely critical, which I know we'll get to. What's the final advantage?
The fourth advantage is about future-proofing your organization. It's about building future-ready teams by prioritizing learning agility.
In a world where AI and automation are changing everything.
Everything. Roles are changing faster than any curriculum can possibly manage. So organizations need people who can quickly unlearn old ways and embrace new tools.
And by hiring for that capability, for that learning agility.
You're inherently building a more nimble organization. When technology disrupts a role, your workforce can adjust faster because you hired them for their ability to learn, not just for what they already knew. You build resilience into the very DNA of your company.
This all sounds like a strategic no-brainer.
Yeah.
But of course, any big change is hard. It's never as simple as just flipping a switch.
Right.
So let's get into the hurdles. What are the biggest challenges companies face when they try to make this transition?
The single biggest hurdle, honestly, is often invisible. It's internal, it's cultural resistance and habitual bias.
The inertia of the system.
Exactly. An organization can remove degree requirements on paper, they can put out a press release, but the internal habit of prioritizing that educational pedigree, it dies hard, especially with hiring managers and recruiters.
So it's the difference between the official policy and the informal day-to-day practice.
That's it. The policy changes, but the behavior stays the same because it's comfortable. If a manager is under pressure to hire someone quickly, they'll always revert to the safest, most familiar proxy they know.
The prestigious degree.
Always. And you see it in the data. You see a high drop-off rate for non-degreed candidates really early in the screening process, even when the official policy says they should be considered.
Okay, so let's say a company manages to start tackling that cultural piece. What's the next hurdle, the more technical one?
That leads directly to the second challenge, execution ambiguity, particularly around what we call skill mapping.
Skill mapping, what do you mean by that?
If the core competencies for a role aren't defined with extreme precision, if they aren't validated and tied to real business outcomes, then the hiring team just falls back on vague terms.
Like strong leadership or a good communicator.
Exactly. And that ambiguity creates massive inconsistency. And inconsistency is a breeding ground for unconscious bias to creep right back in.
So tell me more about the complexity here. Skill mapping sounds like it's more than just making a list of skills for a job.
Oh, it's far more complex. To do this right, an organization really needs to build a robust skill on taxonomy.
On ontology. That sounds serious.
It is. It's a structured hierarchical definition of every skill, how it relates to other skills, and, this is the crucial part, the specific observable behaviors associated with different levels of proficiency.
So you can't just say data analysis.
No. You have to specify proficiency in Python for large dataset manipulation at a level 3. And that level 3 has to translate to a specific set of coding behaviors and outcomes. If you don't build that precise framework, your hiring teams are all working off different subjective definitions.
And the whole process becomes unreliable. You're just hiring on gut feel again.
Exactly. So that vagueness sabotages the entire effort before you even get to the candidate.
And speaking of the candidate, that brings us to the assessment itself. That has its own set of risks, right?
Absolutely. This is challenge 3, assessment risks. The very tool that are supposed to democratize hiring, the simulations, the tests, the work samples, they can actually reinforce inequality if they aren't designed and validated with extreme care.
How so?
Well, you have to be wary of assessments that use complicated jargon or that assume a certain cultural or educational background. Or worse, use tasks that don't actually reflect what the person will be doing on the job.
And I imagine there's a serious legal component here, too. You have to ensure fairness.
It's paramount. Any new assessment tool has to be validated to make sure there's no adverse impact.
Meaning it doesn't disproportionately screen out people from protected groups.
Correct. If it does, you've not only defeated the entire purpose of your D&I goals, but you've opened the company up to significant legal risk. The assessments have to be accessible, relevant, and proven to measure actual job capability, period.
And that validation process takes time and money.
A lot of time and money. It's often seriously underestimated.
So it's a multi-year change management project, not just a quarterly HR initiative.
That's the key. And the hardest part is often educating senior leaders. They have to understand that the ROI is long-term.
It's in better retention and wider talent access.
Right. But the upfront cost and effort are significant. Too often, leaders pull back when they don't see immediate results, and the whole project loses steam and fails. It needs sustained commitment from the very top.
Okay, the challenges are very real, but the advantages are too big to ignore. So let's pivot to the solutions, the best practices.
Good.
If a company is truly serious about making this transition, what are the actionable steps they need to take? Let's start with practice 1, which has to be defining those skills with absolute precision.
This is the bedrock. Without it, everything else crumbles. Organizations have to do a robust job analysis to break roles down into specific competencies. And it's not just the skill, but the proficiency levels and the observable success indicators for each one.
And the key question is always,
What core skills, articulated as measurable behaviors, actually drive success in this position?
can you give us a more technical example of what that precision looks like? How do you get beyond just saying level 3 proficiency?
A best practice here is using something called behavioral anchored rating scales, or BARS.
Bars. Okay.
Instead of a subjective rating, BARS defines proficiency by tying it to a specific observable behavior. So for leadership, instead of a 1 to 5 scale, a BARS might define a level 4 leader as someone who, quote, actively mentors junior colleagues, delegates 30% of their workload to develop their team, and resolves conflict without senior intervention.
So it's not a judgment, it's a checklist of behaviors.
It replaces ambiguous judgment with verifiable criteria. It reduces bias and dramatically improves fit.
Okay, once you have that precision, you can move to practice 2, using real-world assessments. We need to actually see the capability in action.
Exactly. The resume is just a historical document. Real-world assessments are the single best predictor of future performance. This means you have to restructure your interview process.
Away from just asking questions.
Right, towards methods that make the candidate actually perform the job. This can be detailed portfolios, job simulations tailored to your company's challenges, specific coding tasks, case studies.
Even collaborative exercises for leadership roles.
Yes. Seeing how they work with potential teammates can reveal more than any interview question ever could. You're making the hiring decision much more data-driven.
But this requires a huge cultural and behavioral shift for the hiring managers. That brings us to practice 3. Retrain and shift the mindset.
This is non-negotiable. The training has to be deep and it has to be persistent. Recruiters and managers need to be trained not just on the new system, but on how to actively look beyond those traditional status signals.
You're training them to fight their own cognitive biases.
You are. You're coaching them to ask deeper, structured capability questions. Things like, tell me about a time you applied skill X to solve problem Y, and detail the specific results.
You're forcing them to evaluate based on evidence, not a feeling.
Right. Their job is now to identify verifiable talent, not screen based on proxies, and the organization has to measure them on their adherence to this new framework.
And once this new system is up and running, you can't just leave it alone. Practice 4 must be track, blend, and iterate.
Data is your best friend here, especially when you're fighting that cultural resistance. You have to rigorously monitor the metrics for your skills-first hires.
Performance reviews, retention rates.
All of it. Are they outperforming degree-only hires? Are they staying longer? Is the process actually improving diversity? Is your time to hire going down?
And that data allows you to refine the process over time.
Exactly. You discard what doesn't work and you double down on what does. Iteration is absolutely essential.
And finally, we have to be realistic. This isn't a one-size-fits-all solution for every single job out there.
No, and that's where the blending part comes in. Skills-first hiring doesn't mean credentials never matter.
Right. For doctors or engineers, you obviously need a credential.
Of course. In regulated fields where public safety is at stake, healthcare, accounting, engineering a credential is non-negotiable for legal and liability reasons.
So what's the best practice there?
It's a hybrid approach. You blend the necessary compliance, which is the credential, with skill agility and superior capability.
So the degree is the ticket to enter, but the skills are what get you the job.
Precisely. The focus shifts from merely having the degree to demonstrating mastery of core competencies and an advanced capacity for continuous learning. You ensure both safety and innovation are met.
This whole conversation has really highlighted a critical evolution for companies. Skills-based hiring isn't a rejection of education.
Not at all.
It's more of an evolution in how we measure readiness, potential, and long-term value.
The true differentiator isn't the piece of paper on the wall anymore. It's the tangible, measurable value someone creates through their proven dynamic abilities.
Recognizing where that value truly lies, that seems to be the strategic advantage that will separate the market leaders from everyone else.
I think so. In a world where specialized, outcome-focused learning is more accessible than ever, focusing on capability is how you build a stronger, more adaptable, and genuinely future-ready workforce, one that can handle whatever comes next.
So what does this all mean for you listening? Well, organizations that fail to adopt this rigorous, data-driven, skills-first mindset, they risk missing out entirely on the agile learners and innovators who are ready to drive transformation today.
It's about moving beyond what's comfortable and starting to look for what's capable.
And to our listeners, thanks for joining us for another episode of the HR Game Changers. We'll catch you next time.